Welcome back, another episode. Episode 8 of the Frasier Reboot puts more emphasis on David as Frasier finds another method to make himself look foolish at Harvard. Following Lilith's reappearance in Freddy's birthday, the 7th episode of the Frasier Reboot, the Paramount Plus revival returns the attention of the audience to the main protagonists. Even though Frasier appears to have at last adapted to his new role as an educator, his Harvard problems persist. The 8th episode of the Frasier Reboot follows him as he adjusts to his new job after a few weeks off from addressing his professional arc. In addition, the initiative explores the younger Crane family member in greater detail. The Frasier Reboot appears to be steadily gaining ground after a rough beginning. In contrast to the first exhibition, which seemed to be a well-oiled machine right from the start, the follow-up project needed some fine-tuning. Though there are still a number of storyline problems, it is evident that the creative team behind the Paramount Plus remake knows what worked about its predecessor. This is seen in the 8th episode of the Frasier Reboot, The B Story, which successfully integrates Frasier's home life and work life at Harvard. This makes for a lively episode with lots of belly laugh-inducing scenes. In episode 8, Frasier describes his real job at Harvard. When someone addresses Frasier as Professor Crane, he returns his pupil's papers in the opening scene of The B Story. The character, who has been referred to as Dr. Crane since his days of private practice and public service through his radio show in Seattle and talk show in Chicago, has a new title. Even though it has a certain respect, Frasier quickly corrects his pupil, referring to him as only an adjunct visiting guest lecturer in residence. He doesn't go into detail about what that entails in terms of his workload in relation to Harvard's tenured colleagues. Nonetheless, the conversation inspires him to advance in his academic career. In episode 8, David struggles with Frasier's class. Frasier and David's relationship is one of the more distinctive aspects of the Frasier revival. The original show's ending featured the birth of Niles and Daphne's kid, but it was unable to depict any of his upbringing in Seattle. But from his appearance in the Frasier Reboot, he seems to be a hybrid of his parents, and as he is Niles' kid, he becomes quite upset when he finds out he had a B on his paper. David, desperate to end his streak, asks his uncle if he can prepare another paper that would earn him the grade he wants. Frasier's attempt to get a Harvard professorship. Frasier, feeling uneasy about his Harvard title position, tries to enlist Olivia's assistance in obtaining a professorship at the university. Alan claims that despite being a professor, Frasier works nearly exactly as hard as he does. Olivia, however, argues that a professorship cannot be awarded by a university to someone merely for being a former psychiatrist or for being a virtual celebrity. But he won't stop bragging about all of his achievements, including the daytime Emmy he received for hosting Dr. Crane following Frasier's move to Chicago. Olivia agrees to assist him by arranging a meeting with Provost Sharma, the chair of the review board, despite her initial misgivings. Alan's alcohol issue is revealed in episode 8 of the Frasier Reboot. After a less than satisfactory initial encounter at Mahoney's with Provost Sharma, Frasier persists in his pursuit of a professorship with him. When he invites him to sit in his class, everything proceeds smoothly. But when he asks Alan and the chair of the review board to have coffee in his office, calamity strikes. The entire situation reveals Alan's alcoholism, which all but destroys Frasier's second attempt to win over Provost Sharma, who has been adamant about his faculty members' drinking habits. Frasier contains his embarrassment before his Harvard supervisors in the 8th episode. Frasier tries a third time to win over Provost Sharma by making him his favorite treat, honey bun, believing that the third time is lucky. It's obvious to Freddy right away that this is a horrible idea. To make matters worse, though, Frasier gets stung by a bee while David uses him as leverage to argue about the grade on his paper. Although they can take an EpiPen, which is a blessing, it leaves Frasier drowsy and inebriated. Nevertheless, he continues to attend the review board assembly in that state despite his son's advice, ruining his prospects of obtaining the much sought-after professorship in the Frasier revival. For more, subscribe.